On this edition of In the Gun, Zach Frazier is a Steeler, and a couple other Mountaineers have found homes in the NFL. We'll discuss the NFL draft and where the Mountaineers are going. And we've also got an exciting spring game to recap, the return of two legends, a couple new uniforms to discuss. Plenty to get to on this edition of ITG.
Let's go!
You are now watching Believe. Do you believe?
Go single! Thomas nuts!
ITG.
You know, folks there in West Virginia, they believe in God, country, family, and Mountaineer football, and not necessarily in that order.
There will be a product on the field that will match the fans that we have.
Come on across the Star City Bridge and on up the hill.
You're in the right place. You are In the Gun.
Because once you enter this family, there's no getting out.
In the Gun, episode 158 of your new favorite WVU football podcast. I am Wesley Euler, flanked today by the signal caller, Jed Drenning. The duo of this podcast who was at the spring game are going to talk about the spring game, all right? And the one-fourth, the quarter of this podcast, who was at the Steelers facility on Friday night when they drafted Zach Frazier. We're going to talk about Zach Frazier and some of these other Mountaineers who have new homes across the NFL as well. So plenty to get to. This is going to be a fun edition of In the Gun. We have to thank, of course, our friends at BetOnline for being a presenting sponsor of this edition of ITG. BetOnline, where the game starts. Jed, how we doing? It's been a busy couple days here, exciting couple days, plenty to dive into for us here on this edition of In the Gun.
It was a great weekend for a whole host of reasons, for Mountaineer fans, for Steeler fans, for both. We celebrated our 21st anniversary, me and Chrissy. So
Nice.
Stefano's it was the night before the spring games. So
Love
we were
it.
in Morgantown for that, but great couple of days, real exciting for Mountaineer fans. So much going on, cool stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. We got some spring game to discuss. We got some new uniforms, some new signees. But we're going to start with our guy, Zach Frazier. If you're watching on YouTube, I've got the jersey. Now, granted, this jersey is now dated. All right, we'll get to that in just a few minutes. But we've had plenty of Zach Frazier conversation, rightfully so on this show. Let me say that again 5 times fast. Rightfully so on this show. Ever since February, we talked about Zach and heard from Zach at the Combine. We had Zach and his father, Ray, on In the Gun here not too long ago as Zach was preparing for the Combine. We had been waiting. We had been knowing that Zach was going to be one of those guys in this draft that wasn't going to have to wait too long, right? Maybe not on the first night in the first round on Thursday, but that he wasn't going to have to wait too long on Friday to hear his name called and, be the highest drafted Mountaineer that we've seen in a few years. And that did happen in the second round, pick 51 overall to the Pittsburgh Steelers, Jed. And I was shocked. I mean, I knew this was a possibility. The Steelers need a center. Zach Frazier is a center. I mean, this has always been a possibility, but it was kind of like much differently for me, but similar, same church, different pew to the Kenny Pickett thing. Like 2 years ago, I thought, yeah, the Steelers could draft Kenny Pickett. Certainly. The Steelers need a quarterback. Kenny Pickett's a quarterback. This could certainly happen. And then when it did happen, you were like, wow, like, can't believe that happened. This was the same thing for me 2 years later, except for with a much bigger smile on my face this time around. Like, I knew this was a possibility that Zach Frazier could be a Pittsburgh Steeler, but it's the draft. It's a crapshoot. It's a lottery ticket, right? So when we got the news, I texted you and Skylar, and I just said, it's happening. That's all I said. And you guys texted me back like 30 times, but I was in the middle of doing a show, and I was on air at the Steelers facility right outside the war room when the news broke that the Steelers were drafting Zach Frazier. So you guys can imagine, like, I'm going to say this, Jed, and it's going to seem like I have a massive ego, and I promise I don't mean it to come off this way, but like, I was kind of the center of attention down there at the Steelers facility in that moment, because everyone's like, Wes, look what just happened. Wes, look what's, and I'm on the radio trying to give my instant analysis, and everyone wants to hear my thoughts on Zach as, Pittsburgh's foremost Mountaineer who knows the most about this guy in town, while like different coaches and scouts and media members are like coming over and like, you like that pick, didn't you? it was incredible. I couldn't believe it. Honestly, I can't really believe it now that, like, when I'm at OTAs here in rookie minicamp in a few weeks, Zach Frazier's going to be there wearing a Steelers uniform. When I'm out in Latrobe staying in the dorms for 3 weeks for training camp for my job, Zach Frazier's going to be there staying in the dorms as well, too. It's pretty cool. Listen, I know WVU fans are split on this, okay? A large faction of WVU fans love the Steelers. Large faction of WVU fans hate the Steelers because they play in the same town and in the same stadium as Pitt, and F those guys, right? Wherever you're at on that spectrum, I think we can all agree it's pretty cool that Zach's going to get to play football less than 2 hours away from where he grew up in the National Football League. And obviously, me, as someone who works for the Pittsburgh Steelers organization, I'm thrilled. I mean, every home game when Zach gets introduced and Larry Richards' voice, the PA voice of the Steelers, comes on the intercom and goes, "At center from West Virginia University, Zach Frazier." I'm going to lose my ever-loving mind, hopefully for the next decade. This is exciting. And I want to let you get in here, Jed, but when you're done, even if you are one of those people who hates the Steelers, or you're just kind of, you don't really care, you're not a Steeler fan, you don't love them, you don't hate them, I'm going to tell you why you should be excited about this for Zach from his perspective. But obviously, I've been rambling too long now, and I want to let you give just kind of your initial reactions to everything that transpired on Friday evening.
I enjoyed every second of it. And in fact, I'll ask you to ramble more by asking you a question. Do you remember, previous to the text you sent telling us it's happening, which I was beside myself. I'll get into.
You and Skylar are both like, wait, does this mean what I think it does?
Yes, that's right. Well, then you ghosted us because you had a job to do. So what was interesting was this. And this just goes to show you there are so many moving parts. Now, yes, you can have a puncher's chance on some level just based on needs, availability earlier in the draft to maybe project something. It's not like the 5th round where everything's completely a crapshoot. At pick 51, there's still a little bit of projection involved. Yes, the Steelers still need a center. 2 centers just went. I posted a tweet. Yeah, it doesn't make me Nostradamus. 5-6 picks before the Steelers took him. The bell tolls for the Zach Frazier after the second center went, because you knew something was about to happen. There's even chatter coming out now. The Steelers considered trading up to get him just to make sure.
Yep.
But here's what I want to ask you. Do you remember the name you gave us first when we said, hey, this is unfolding the way we dreamed of in the second round? And you said, yes, but the Steelers are also in love with, can you want to fill in the blank there?
It was a wide receiver, right? From Texas.
Yes. Yes.
Who went the pick exactly after the Steelers to the Indianapolis Colts. Mitchell from Texas.
Yeah, it was Mitchell from Texas. You told us several picks ahead of time when we're saying, hey, this could actually happen. Hey, they also love Mitchell. Well, the Steelers took Zach, and the next pick at 52 goes Mitchell. So good for you. Hats off to you. But you know what's funny is last week, I was trying not to bother Ray Frazier too awful much, just because his world is so chaotic right now, as is Zach's. Even last week leading up, it just intensified. I just kind of shot him a text. Excited for you and Zach and the family, hoping the best, but I sure would like to see him land nearby. That's what I told him. And his response, now, read into this what you want. Now, everybody knows we have both of them on the podcast. Ray grew up in Florida. Yep. Zach is named after Zach Thomas. Miami Dolphins great. Yep. Zach wears number 54 because of Zach Thomas. Well, Ray Frazier's response to me when I said that to him, I sure wouldn't mind seeing him wear black and gold. That was his response last week. So maybe it's just because it's an hour and a half up 79, or maybe it's because that was on one of those lists
on
of
game
teams
days. And I know Ray. So hopefully Ray's listening to this. On game days, give yourself 2 hours, all right? Because you're going to have to get through the tunnels, all right? It's going to take a little bit longer on game days. Just give yourself 2 hours to get there for fair.
That's true. And you know, it's just so cool how it all unfolded. I agree with Coach Brown. Coach Brown said, look, Zach Frazier's a first-round pick. I completely agree. But the way that it unfolded, and you knew it was going to happen in the second round. So in this odd way, Zach
and to be
was
fair,
kind of in position.
Jed, I think people forget this, but like, if he wouldn't have broken his leg at Thanksgiving, he might have been a first-round pick. I mean, that's still a big part of this.
I might argue that helped him with the Steelers. In other words, what did we say after that happened? He will get drafted early, not despite of that, but in part because of that, because it was one more thing that they saw he would attack like everything he's attacked in his whole life and get out in front of schedule on his rehab, and he did. People couldn't believe how fast he was walking, how fast he was running, how fast he was going through drills, and now he's back to 100%. He just said so in his presser in Pittsburgh the other day. But I thought it was kind of neat. It's not often in the second round that you can kind of have your draft get together with supreme confidence because you know you're going in the second round, right? But he was in position to do that. He was down at his uncle's house in Bridgeport. Coach Brown was there. I interviewed Dante Stills to the spring game on Saturday. Dante was there.
He was there. I saw him in the background.
It was just cool to see him surrounded by. Zach even said, "Hey, my uncle was a Cowboys fan, so I had to go upstairs. He was having cell phone issues when Tomlin called him. Tomlin couldn't hear him. He could hear Tomlin. But what a terrific story." But I did a Pittsburgh radio hit. I think I told you after the spring game Saturday afternoon, they were asking about Zach. And I started with this, and this is the ongoing message about Zach Frazier. To me, if you want to be a can't miss player, it certainly helps to first be a can't miss person. And Zach Frazier is absolutely all that and more.
No doubt.
We've talked all the live long day on this podcast and many other places about what a tremendous human being Zach is. Everything about him. He's a great teammate. He's a great friend. He's a great leader in all the right ways. Not outspoken, not vocally, just through his habits, through his behaviors. The fact that hours after this soul-crushing loss on a Hail Mary at Houston, he's in the cancer center with a young cancer patient with Garrett. Him and Garrett Green are, visiting the cancer center. His relationship.
He got Jed. He got the
members of his family.
I was just gonna say, you and I were texting about. Got the entire athletic department to add closed captioning to the video content for the deaf members of his family, which, by the way, Steelers.com is going to do a feature story on because of myself and Jed and connecting Ray with some people there. So we'll make sure to share that story on our social media accounts whenever it gets written.
Absolutely. He's an incredible person. And the reason I start with that instead of the technical side of things, I think we all recognize on the field between the lines what Zach Frazier is capable of. I mean, he stepped in as a true freshman. And I love hearing Matt Moore talk about Zach's early days in Morgantown. Zach Frazier was impacting and changing the behaviors of seniors as a true freshman. There were seniors on that 2020 football team that looked at Zach and said, "Oh, you can do it like this? You're allowed to show up like this? You're allowed to be this early and do this and stay late?" He was changing the behaviors as a true freshman of seniors on that football team. So he did an incredibly difficult thing to do, and that is change the fortunes of a football program at large from the center position. He's not a quarterback. He's a center.
Right.
Very unheralded position. Zach was the cornerstone in us starting to swing our fortunes back in the directions that we want, that ultimately landed in a 9-4 season last year.
Yep.
And we aspire for bigger things to come ahead. That will still be something that was planted by Zach Frazier when he arrived in 2020, those seeds. But Zach is going to have a long and fruitful NFL career. Again, as a Steeler fan, I am one of those guys. I got a mom from southwestern PA, so I grew up both a Mountaineer fan and a Steeler fan, and you hear a lot of these types of stories. But he is, wherever he was going to go, he was going to potentially be one of the faces of that franchise and do everything the right way. And I think it's terribly exciting to see what the Steelers did in this draft, including Zach. It's almost like they were saying, "Hey, we don't have this marquee quarterback that everybody else in the league has. You know what we're going to do instead? We're going to draft in such a way." It was Omar Khan's second draft as general manager. He did a lot similar things last year with the selections he made last year. But it felt like this draft was Zach Frazier and those around him. We're just going to drag teams into an alley and see what happens. We don't have the marquee, flashy quarterback. We don't have the Pat Mahomes.
Jed, if you're going to brawl out in the alley, wouldn't you like a 4-time state champion wrestler out there with you?
Absolutely. But everything about Zach, whether it's pass pro, whether it's man blocking in the run game, whether it's zone blocking in the run game, and if you show him a deficiency, he'll attack that deficiency and ultimately turn it into a strength.
Yep.
That's what he's going to do. That's who he is. He's going to do everything the right way. And I'm perfectly comfortable in saying when you look at an organization with the pedigree that the Steelers have, the Steelers have always done it from the inside out, not just with great defense, but with great offensive lines. More specifically at the center position, Mike Webster,
Yeah,
Dawson,
that's where I was going to
Marquise
close all this
Pouncey,
down with.
Zach Frazier fits in perfectly with that. He will be tall to the task. He'll answer the bell. I'm just so excited for Zach, for Ray, for their whole family. They've done everything the right way at every step along the way. And it could not happen to a better and more deserving person. Again, it's just one more thing that Zach might never say it, but being the third center selected, of course, that's one more thing that'll put a little chip on his shoulder. He'll never admit that. That's just who he is.
Sure.
He's not that type of guy, but it's just one more reason that he will play with even more of an edge if that's possible. But you're going to get everything that kid has to offer and more. I am so incredibly excited for him and to know that they can drive a couple hours up the interstate, visit them whenever they want, go to whatever game they want. They're not far from Latrobe to watch them in training camp. Mountaineer fans will be in Latrobe now. They'll be migrating to Latrobe. So the whole thing's just an awesome story, and I'm excited for you to be around all of it. I mean,
Yeah,
I was thinking
selfishly,
this, Wes. I texted
it's
you.
amazing for me.
I think I shot this text into the group thread a couple of years ago. There was a Pittsburgh Steeler, not only on the sideline for the backyard brawl in Pittsburgh, but gallivanting around with the head coach, Pat Narduzzi, before the game, making a big to-do, and that was Kenny Pickett. Well, this year, there will once again be a Pittsburgh Steeler on the sidelines at the backyard brawl in Pittsburgh, and it won't be Kenny Pickett. It'll be former West Virginia Mountaineer Zach
Beanie Bishop.
Frazier.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Pittsburgh. We'll get to that. Yeah.
No, I had to make that joke. But yeah, that's a great point. And listen, I mean, selfishly for me, you're right. I had to endure the last 2 years of talking about Kenny Pickett every single day. All right. I deserve this for me. All right. Wesley Valen Euler, Mr. WVU deserves this. But real quick, I did want to, one last thing that you said there. I loved how you said Zach transformed just the transformation of the offense, of the run game, of the offensive line, of the program by a non-quarterback, particularly a center. The number that drives that home perfectly. I said this on the Steelers radio network. I gave this in the last 3 days. I've probably given this statistic a half dozen times on different radio shows and stuff. When Zach got onto campus, we averaged 73 yards per game rushing.
Yes.
I mean, it was like early in the Neil Brown era with Letty Brown, it was like, if we can get to 100 yards on the ground, we got a great chance to win this game, but we got to get to 100 yards on the ground.
That season, I had to go back to the 60s, and I was exhausting every resource that I had statistically, all the way back to the 60s to find the last time West Virginia was that deficient running the football.
Our run game was dire when Zach Frazier stepped onto campus. If they could rush for 100 yards in a game, it was a miracle. By the time he left, they averaged over 230 yards per game rushing and had the best rushing attack in Power 5 football, and did that while going over 200 snaps without giving up a sack as well, too.
2.6 yards per carry.
That's transformation.
In 2019 has more than doubled to 5.3.
That's just insane. That's
2.6. I'm telling you,
bad.
We weren't just bad. Every time I do an interview talking about how Zach helped rebuild this thing,
I gave that stat a half dozen
we weren't
times
just bad in 2019.
Yep.
We were historically bad. We had Colton McKivitz and a cast of thousands. That's what we had. And it started with Zach, and we built for Zach. Didn't do it alone. We all know that. But Zach was the first building block to put us in position.
That's the right way to put it.
To get this thing cranking.
Yep. Last thing here, because we've been giving Zach a lot of love, and he deserves it, but we got to talk about where some of these other Mountaineers have landed as well, too. But I feel like, Jed, I've spent the last couple days telling Steelers fans about Zach Frazier, okay? Now, before we go, just give me 2 minutes here to tell, or before we move on, give me 2 minutes to tell Zach Frazier fans about the Steelers. And you kind of touched on this. And again, I realize a lot of people listening to this right now, you're not just not a Steeler fan. You're upset that they drafted Zach because you're like, oh man, our guy went there, right? Like, I hate those guys. I hate Pitt. I hate the Steelers. You know what? I don't even care about hockey, but I hate the Penguins too, just because they're that close to the Pitt campus or whatever. I'm not naive. I know a lot of our listeners feel that way. So let me tell you this. You should at least be happy for Zach and the opportunity that he has, because as Jed briefly touched on there, the Steelers' history at the center position is most likely the finest in the history of the National Football League.
Sure is.
And because of that, the Pittsburgh Steelers fan base appreciates and cares about center play much more than any other fan base, maybe only a couple in the NFL that could compare. Mike Webster, who Jed mentioned, 4-time Super Bowl champion, over 150 starts at the center position. Iron Mike Webster changed the position. A lot of people will tell you the best center to ever play the game out of Wisconsin. I wish Owen was on here while we were giving Mike Webster some love. Dermontti Dawson, both of these guys Hall of Famers, by the way, Mike Webster and Dermontti Dawson. Dermontti Dawson literally changed the center position. He was the first center in the NFL to pull. Like centers never pulled in the NFL before Dermontti Dawson, a perennial All-Pro, a Hall of Famer, made it to a Super Bowl, but lost to the Cowboys in 95-96. Jeff Hardings, 2-time All-Pro, Super Bowl champion, not a Hall of Famer, but Hall of really stinking good. 2-time All-Pro, Super Bowl champion Jeff Hardings, and then Marquise Pouncey, as Jed mentioned, 6-time All-Pro Marquise Pouncey, who played 9 years in the NFL, and for 6 or 7 of those was the best center in football. Coin flip to get into the Hall of Fame, I think Pouncey is. His career he's kind of like the Patrick Willis thing, right? Like, short career, only 9 years, but man, about 7 of those, you could legitimately argue him as the best at his position in the league. 2 Hall of Famers, an All-Pro who was a Super Bowl champion, a perennial All-Pro who has a legit chance to be a Hall of Famer. Marquise Pouncey also, by the way, was the NFL's center for their all-decade team in the 2010s. So where I'm going with all this is, even if you hate the Steelers and you were pissed that Zach went there, which again, I'm sure plenty of you were, if you succeed as a center for the Pittsburgh Steelers, you'll live forever. Like, amongst a fan base that spans the globe, the biggest fan bases in the world, other than maybe like Real Madrid and some of these soccer teams, right?
Yeah.
Steelers, Cowboys, Yankees, Lakers. I mean, like, the Steelers are on that short list of biggest fan bases in the world. So they span the globe. And so I don't say all that to put pressure on a guy, Zach, who's still 22 years old and hasn't even taken a snap in the NFL. You know what I mean? But it is a real opportunity. Kind of like Jed said, centers don't get this kind of press and publicity and love and attention and adulation all the time. And in Pittsburgh, you can succeed there and you will live forever. It's a real opportunity for Zach Frazier to be legendary amongst a fan base that spans the globe and loves the center position.
Omar Khan, and I loved what he said. Omar Khan, the general manager for the Steelers, said, I felt like I owed the Steeler fans a great center. And I love that. I love that. And here's what I'll say. Last thing I'll say about this with the Steelers and Zach. Just remember, if you're trying if you are one of those folks who hate the Steelers, but now Zach's there, so what am I going to do? Just remember this. Wes talked about how broad and incredibly massive the Steeler fan base is worldwide. Well, just remember this. All 6 Pitt fans might be Steeler fans, but only 6 Steeler fans are Pitt fans. Just remember that. Correct. That makes it a little more palatable, right?
Correct. Yes.
So
the ones, the Pitt fans that you deal with that make you hate the Steelers are a fraction of the Steelers fan base. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Pitt is an afterthought to Steeler fans too. Just remember that. So
that's exactly right. In fact, they're probably like their 4th or 5th favorite team, depending on how, depending on how like the Riverhounds, the minor league soccer team, is doing. They might jump up to 4th from time to time.
Well, remember, I remember this. Andy Van Slyke came from the Cardinals. And I always point this out.
Yeah, you love
when
this
Andy
quote.
Van Slyke arrived from St. Louis, where St. Louis worships the Cardinals, Cardinal baseball, right? He arrives in Pittsburgh, and he said, you very quickly learn in the city of Pittsburgh, it's our Steelers, our Penguins, the Pirates. He didn't even mention
He
Pitt.
didn't even mention Pitt.
So, yes, proceed. Let's get to these
Another
undrafted free agents.
Another thank you to our friend JR and our guys at Toothman Ford. We all know cars cost less in Grafton. Big shout out to JR and to everyone there at Team Toothman. Speaking of the Steelers, Beanie Bishop. I mean, if you hate the Steelers, I'm sorry. I've got worse news. Beanie Bishop signing with the Steelers as well, too. And Jed, this is another one of those things that I can kind of tip my cap for you to. Like, he was at the top. Like, the Steelers were in those final 10, 15, 20 picks of the draft. The Steelers were hoping Beanie wasn't drafted. Like, he was at the top of their undrafted free agent wish list. And the Steelers have a massive, massive hole at that nickel corner position. And I know that he doesn't have a ton of experience doing that, but I think he has a skill set that can translate there. Where I'm going with this is he's going to have a real opportunity. A lot of times, some of these undrafted guys, they're signed as long shots, and let's bring them in for training camp, and we know it's most likely not going to work out. But Beanie has a real shot to land here. And there's a history of the Steelers taking undrafted corners and turning them into really good nickel cornerbacks like Mike Hilton, who just got a massive contract from the Bengals. And I think Beanie has an opportunity. I mean, Arthur Mollett was with the Steelers like that and then got a nice contract with the Ravens. I mean, the Steelers have a history of taking these undrafted corners, turning them into nice nickels, and then they move on and get a nice contract somewhere else in the NFL. And the Steelers kind of go and develop the next one. I think Beanie has a real shot to stick on here.
Look at Beanie's greatest strength. Beanie Bishop, in my estimation, is the first guy in the history of college football to earn consensus All-American honors by pass breakups and passes defended, not by flashy interceptions. He only had 4. He always finds a way to make his way to the football in flight, which ultimately is the most critical piece of being a defensive back. Mm-hmm. And he plays the ball in the air. He doesn't get disoriented. I mean, some of these guys have all the measurables. They're faster than Beanie in the cones. They're faster than Beanie in the 40. They have all the measurables, but they don't have that knack that Beanie has. When the ball is in the air, you don't get paralyzed. You don't freeze. You don't get scared. You're at your best. That's the type of skill set that if he starts making plays on the ball, interceptions be damned. If you pick it off, great. But your job is to not allow the football to be caught as a defensive back. If he gets in camp and starts breaking up passes at the nickel spot or otherwise, that's going to garner some attention. And I like the fact that he's bringing versatility with him. If you want to be that last guy to make an NFL roster or make the taxi squad, make the cut on any level, what else can you do beyond your primary position?
Special teams. You got to be able to play special teams.
I like the fact he took a punt return to the house in the bowl game. That's the benefit. I told him when he came to the sidelines in the bowl game, that's why you play in these games.
Yep.
So now, I'm not saying he's going to come out and be their PR1 in Pittsburgh.
He'll get a look, though.
They like the idea that if you're one of those 2, 3, 4 guys on the roster that things go south or things go sideways, we can count on you to put in their return punts. That adds value. And we're talking about an organization, Wes, you know this better than anybody, the history of this Pittsburgh Steelers organization. Look at some of the undrafted free agents and what they've done with these guys, from Donnie Shell in the 70s, a safety. We all know how that went. Mm-hmm. James Harrison, more recently, undrafted free agent. I'm not saying that's what Beanie's going to do, but I am saying that organizationally, the Steelers tend to be a team. They don't care what your pedigree is. They don't care where you were selected or not selected. They want to make sure that you bring value and you improve the roster. And if Beanie can show up in camp and start doing that, who knows what may or may not happen.
Jed, it's funny you say that. I've covered 6 Steelers training camps. This one, will be my 7th. In the amount of times I've heard Mike Tomlin say to the young guys, to the either the draft picks or the undrafted guys, I don't care how you got here. I just care what you show me. Like, you know what I mean? I don't care how you got here. I just care what you can do for us. The amount of times I've heard Mike Tomlin say that in 6 years, I would need more fingers to count. So, like I said, he obviously has an uphill battle. He's an undrafted free agent. They have no commitment. The Steelers cut him. It cost them nothing. It wasn't a draft pick. It doesn't hurt their salary cap. None of that. Like, he's got an uphill battle, but he's got a legitimate chance. It's not just hey, come out here and we need some bodies for practice for a couple weeks. and then you can get on with your life's work, as Chuck Noll would say, to quote another Steelers coach there as well too. Son, it's time to get on with your life's work. Beanie has a real opportunity to keep football as his life's work. And so I was excited for that one. A couple more, Jed. Our guy Skyler was excited because Devin Carter ends up with the Panthers. I like that opportunity for him. It's a young team, a young offense, wide open, blank slate. They got Deontay Johnson and then a whole lot of question marks kind of in terms of a lot of their playmakers. I think that's a good spot for Devin Carter. And then our guy Doug Nestor as well, too, signing with the Vikings. Another organization in Minnesota that has a good track record of developing tackles. And they just recently did it with a Pitt guy. I hate bringing them up or giving them any credit, but a Pitt tackle named Brian O'Neill, who was drafted by the Vikings, wasn't a first-round pick or anything like that, but was drafted by the Vikings and is a good tackle in the National Football League right now. Like the Vikings, they've done a good job of finding young tackles, developing them, and keeping them around. So again, a couple other Mountaineers here landing in spots where they're going to have an opportunity.
Stay tuned on a couple others potentially. We hope that the Lee Cobras, the Marcus Floyds, who knows, we'll keep an eye on that. But as we tape, nothing's played out there in terms of a camp spot or camp invitation. But yeah, start with Devin Carter. He's a Clayton, North Carolina guy. So excited for him in that sense. Obviously, spent those 5 seasons at NC State before coming to West Virginia for his 6th season. He got that extra COVID year for a reason because he's from North Carolina. But that big frame, people are going to be enamored of that big frame Devin brings to the table. And you got a young quarterback in Bryce Young. You got a new staff in Canales coming in from Tampa. So they're trying to sort things out. So I have to believe that you're going to get an absolutely fair shake to make an impact down there. And again, he has one of those things that you can't coach, and that's size, and that's a frame. And whether you're at the college level or whether you're at the NFL level, if you have one of these things that God just bestowed upon a kid, you're going to get maybe a little bit longer look than you otherwise might, whether that's a 4.3 whether that's a 6'4" plus frame on the perimeter, whatever it might be. So you got to think he's going to have a puncher's chance in Carolina. We'll see as they try this rebuild coming off a 2-15 season. They were 2-15 because there's a ton of holes in that roster. Right. And then you talked about Doug Nestor. I will say this. I don't know what plays out at large with the Minnesota Vikings organization, but you have to believe that Kevin O'Connell has things heading the right direction offensively. That's a pretty tight ship offensively.
No doubt.
Now, think about their situation. Off goes their veteran quarterback to Atlanta. In comes a rookie quarterback in J.J. McCarthy. So we'll see what plays out there with a new quarterback. But yeah, I think that offensive staff in Minnesota is very capable. And Doug Nestor is another guy who might just bring you a touch of position flexibility. They're going to like that. So, I mean, I asked him on the sidelines on Saturday. I said, well, hey, what are you hearing? He said, we'll see. Not a whole lot yet. But I said, dude, you're going to be in a camp, and then you're going to show him. And I had to believe that his chance was coming. And sure enough, a handful of hours later, awesome. It did indeed come. He got the call. So very excited for Doug and his opportunity. I do believe that he'll make the most of it as well up in the Great White North. Did you hear J.J. McCarthy's comment?
No.
I had to love this. He was asked to compare and contrast. Now, remember, the quarterback who just departed Minnesota to go to Atlanta
Kirk Cousins
was from Michigan State. Yes,
Ooh,
Kirk Cousins
right.
is a Michigan State guy.
He's a
J.J. McCarthy's a Michigan guy. So there's probably already a little something there anyway. And they said, the media asked him in Minnesota, they said, hey, how do you compare yourself to Kirk Cousins? And he said, that's easy. He wears gold necklaces. I wear national championship rings.
Oh, geez.
I was like, oh, I already like it. I already like it. So that's what Doug's stepping into in Minnesota.
Well, you know what? That's a great zinger. But like, if this is one of those things, if JJ McCarthy ends up not working out and in like 4 or 5 years, Kirk Cousins could be like, I got $300 million in the bank. A good thing you enjoy that. You enjoy that national championship ring.
Maybe you'll buy 3 national championship rings.
Yeah, exactly. That's what he could tweet J. McCarthy and said, hey, I'll give you a couple mil for that national championship ring. I heard you need it.
Yeah.
But yes, so Zach Frazier, Beanie Bishop to the Steelers, Doug Nestor to the Vikings, Devin Carter to the Panthers. Like Jed said, if there is any other movement, we're hoping for some more movement for some guys. We will obviously discuss that on later editions of ITG. But those are the newest homes for our former Mountaineers. Another thank you before we go to break to our friends at Fortis. for roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed. Visit fortis.us.com. Jed, I got a nice package of some Fortis swag from our guy Rick Lewis this past week. I was planning on wearing it on the next edition of ITG until I decided I had to wear the Zach Frazier jersey on here at least one more time. And we got new jerseys and Zach got drafted, so it was just too timely. But on the next edition of ITG, I'll be wearing some of my new Fortis swag.
By the way, we haven't taped since Owen and I hooked up with our guy Rick Lewis.
That's right. Oh,
at
yeah,
Sam
dinner.
Sneed's at the Greenbrier.
How was dinner
We
down
had
at
a
the
black
Greenbrier?
Wes, we were there for 4 hours. I mean, we were just telling stories and enjoying each other's. It was great. It was great. It was tremendous. I mean, it was Owen made it over there. Awesome. And Rick was staying down there. I had a meeting down there, but we powwowed on Tuesday night of last week, and we had a blast. 3.5, 4 hours.
I love it.
Which also, too, if you haven't taken the bunker tour of the Greenbrier, my wife had previously. She told me she'd love it. I for whatever reason, never had. I've been down there many times. I never have. We did that as part of our group. I would highly recommend that. You talk about some really cool historical West Virginia nuggets. I would highly recommend that.
I've been to the Greenbrier 2 or 3 times, but all when I was much younger. And the last time I was there, I think I was in like 6th grade. So I was probably like 11 or 12. And I mean, you know what I mean? Like, you don't really appreciate it at that age. So I have been there 2 or 3 times, but when I was all much younger, and I would love to go back. Rick texted me on Tuesday and said, wish you were able to join us for dinner. And I said to him, that's a far drive from Pittsburgh, unfortunately, right. But hopefully one of these years we'll be able to make it work out. Big thanks to our guy Rick Lewis and Fortis, and I'm glad you all enjoyed yourself there on Tuesday night. We're going to take a break. We got a lot to talk about on the other side too. Spring game, some analysis, some buzz around the uniforms, and of course Pat making their triumphant return to Morgantown. We'll discuss all of that when we return. You are in the gun.
Supports the blue and gold Mountaineers like Toothman Ford. With over 20 NIL deals and counting, Toothman Ford continues to rally behind our student athletes. And it's time we rally and support the dealer that supports the Mountaineers. Not only does Toothman Ford offer the best prices in the state on pre-owned, their never over MSRP campaign on new Fords guaranteed to save you thousands. Drive with pride all season long, knowing you're supporting the dealer that fuels our Mountaineers. Toothman Ford, where cars cost less, in Grafton and at toothmanford.com.
ITG will be right back.
Greer lobs it in the air. Oh, what a catch, Gary Jennings! Touchdown, West Virginia!
For nearly 20 years, Fortis has been the nation's leader in providing guaranteed roof performance programs for commercial buildings. Fortis offers roof performance solutions that feature extensive initial and ongoing reconditioning for commercial buildings as an alternative to traditional replacement, with long-term performance guarantees that are backed by global leader Lloyd's of London. Fortis offers a comprehensive range of roof performance management programs that provide financial security, extend the life of our customers' roofs, and make a significant impact on ROI. Fortis is currently improving performance and increasing ROI for customers at more than 4,800 locations, with more than 140 million square feet protected, including many Fortune 500 companies that have turned to Fortis to save money, gain financial certainty, and extend the life of their existing roofs. Fortis has helped customers save more than $520 million in capital roof replacement costs for an average ROI of over 250%. To learn more, visit fortis.us.com. Fortis, roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed.
If you work the land, you just got to be a jack of all trades type. There's just too much to do. So if you got to be a welder or a farmer or a ditch digger, that's just who you are that day. Then tomorrow, you can be somebody else.
Get your Coyote at the new location of Johnston Equipment between Weston and Buckhannon.
In the gun here, as we have got a spring game to discuss. And listen, every program across the country, they try and create buzz around their spring game. Attention, eyeballs, noise. WVU did that very successfully this past weekend. You saw that with the crowd turnout. Over 18,000 people there, one of the largest spring game crowds in history. Certainly the nice weather helped with that, certainly. But a big part of it was the return of the two Pats. Oh, yeah, Pat White and Pat McAfee, two absolute legends, two of the more beloved figures in program history. Pat White, it's always special when he's around because he's Pat bleeping White. One of the two most you used that word transformative earlier, Jed, when talking about Zach Frazier. You want to talk most transformative players ever to wear the old gold and blue? It's a debate of two between the Major and between Pat White. So Pat White, every time he's back, it's always special. And then Pat McAfee, who was back for the first time in 16 years, long overdue, and just everything that his career from the NFL to where he's at now, Mr. Media, Mr. WWE, Mr. WrestleMania, Jed, that was pretty stinking cool having those guys not only there, but coaching and squaring off on the sideline. I saw you me and all my buddies were laughing. Like the coin toss or not the coin toss, but like the start and everything's going on. And we're like, all right, where's Pat White? Where's Pat McAfee? And my buddy's like, oh, look, they're right down there. Look, Jed's standing right behind him, getting the video. Yes, I can't wait to see what he posts on his Twitter account. Like my buddies all love your Twitter account because you get all the best sideline content. So I know you know better than anybody. That was pretty special what was happening down there on the sidelines.
There's star power, and then there's what we had, the Mountaineer fans on Saturday. I mean, that takes it to a whole different stratosphere. It really does. And for different reasons. I mean, Pat White is one of the most established players between the lines in the history of West Virginia football.
Yep.
I think any fan, as you touched on, would quickly recognize that. So you'd be hard pressed to find somebody more impressive and more accomplished than Pat White. We all know the attributes. We all know the accolades. We all know first and only to start 4 bowl games and win them 5 if you count the Senior Bowl. But then there's McAfee, who in his own right was a great player. Yes, a great player as both a punter and a kicker, had a great NFL career. But the amazing thing about it is he has transcended that to such a degree that pretty soon there's going to be people forgot he played.
No doubt.
Because he's such a larger than life personality.
Like Jed, ask people what Arnold Schwarzenegger got famous for, and no one says bodybuilding. You know what I mean? Like,
great analogy.
That's gonna be McAfee with football.
Yeah. And you know, I don't know. It's probably more difficult to quantify these things in this modern era of digital space and everything else. But if you were to say who are the 2 or 3 most recognizable faces in sports or sports media in the United States of America,
he's in that conversation.
He has to be. He
100%.
has to be.
He might not be on your list of 2 or 3, but he's at least in the conversation. He's in the ballpark.
Absolutely, he is. So to have him come back, and I mean, I'm trying to envision. Of course, one of the things that went viral from this, among many other things, was a recruit in the locker room getting to have this discussion about where he's from, and he's a PA kid too. And
yep,
I'm just trying to imagine what it must be like to be a high school senior and have somebody of that magnitude saying, "Oh, you're coming too. You're part of what we're doing here. This is great." Good luck competing with that. So, of all the things that were said, I think I loved most the fact that he said, "I have to get back here more often." So it's almost like he has every intention of. I don't want to put attach a number to it, but he's going to be back.
Yeah,
I do think that's going to happen. And I liked the fun and the banter going back and forth as a guy who interviewed both of them during the game. They were kind of playing off of each other's interview. I was kind of stirring the pot a little bit. And I said, Pat, this McAfee, I said, but notice that 5 minutes into your coaching career, it took you no longer than 5 minutes to already be in the ear of the officials. Well, you know how McAfee is. He just took that and he almost grabbed the mic from me, and started saying, "Hey, it's not often you get to talk to officials and tell them what you actually think." So I was going to tell them what I actually think. And meanwhile, you got the star power of Pat White on the other sideline. So of course he's getting all the calls. So then I went and told Pat White, and Pat White came back with, "Hey, he's just a loudmouth. He talks for a living. Of course, he's trying to talk to the officials. I think we're getting screwed on some of these calls." It was just incredible fun. The kids were having fun being around it. I mean, Garrett just thoroughly, you could tell by his body language, he thoroughly enjoyed being knee deep in the Pat McAfee factor as his head coach on the sideline.
Yep.
I mean, every part of we had that drill that we ran where we brought a couple fans in from the stands and they went one-on-one to the goal line and Garrett threw to him in the red zone. And McAfee was even talking smack to Garrett because Garrett was his quarterback. Hey, you got to give him a chance. And they take some heat off that thing. Everything about it was awesome. And it was a big recruiting weekend for us with all the kids we had on campus. 18,000 plus showed up in the stands, big, nice turnout, great weather. I mean, God himself and Mother Nature both cooperated to make this a big deal. I talked to Ren literally as I was in my car leaving. I stopped and said, "Hey, you want to jump in the shuttle here?" And he was just absolutely, to steal a phrase, smiling like the butcher's dog. He couldn't have been happier with just how everything unfolded. We had, a sellout weekend for baseball and a big series. It was
Yeah.
just, it
Over
was a great
4,000 people
weekend
at
for
that game
WVU
on Saturday
sports.
too. Yeah.
Yes, in Morgantown. But to have those two back, and you had to strike this balance between promoting it accordingly and also making sure that it happened, especially with McAfee. He's just insane busy. And but to have both of those guys back, it was just special. And everything about it was neat. And it felt like just the tonic this program needed. When you revisit where we were just 12 months ago, and all the question marks and all the questions trying to be answered and the hot seat talk and all that. It was just refreshing to be coming off a 9-4 season, which feels like it might be the springboard to better things, straight into this being the next time we take the field. Everything played out just like you hope it would.
Completely agree. That's very well said by you. And man, you're absolutely right. Like I was thinking that same thing driving home. Like where we were 12 months ago. I mean, it feels like a complete 180. If you would have said 12 months ago this team's going to win 9 games, they're going to have a big fun win over Pitt, they're going to have a big fun bowl win, they're going to be exciting to watch, and then we're going to roll into the offseason. In the spring game, they're going to have Pat McAfee and Pat White back coaching, and they're going to unveil new uniforms, and there's going to be over 18,000 people there. I mean, this is awesome. This is exciting. I got to meet Ren.
Yeah.
Coach Nealon was there as well, too. I got to meet Ren Baker on Saturday. I mean, really, my daughter, my oldest, got to meet Ren Baker. She stole the show, okay? He wanted to talk to her and not to me. Understandably. I mean, she's much cuter than I am. I get it. But it was just, Jed, I've been to a lot of spring games. I know not as many as you, obviously, but I went every year that I was in school. Now that I've been back here in Pittsburgh, it's like our new favorite family tradition because it's just such a great. We drove up and we parked. I mean, I parked literally as close as you could park in the blue lot to the Jumbotron. Like, I mean, I never get to park that close. We got the girls. It's very laid back. There's no wait for the bathrooms. You can go to the concession stand and get a hot dog in 3 minutes. Like it's a perfect family day out. The restaurants aren't as crowded. The traffic isn't as bad. All that stuff. It's a great family game day experience. And we've had some really good ones over the years. We always get our friends and family and their kids. It's become a fun tradition for us over the last few years. And we've had some great years, but I think this one was at the top of the list for a lot of reasons. But man, it was just tough to beat. The two Pats, the uniforms, the weather, the crowd. It was exciting. It really was. And that buzz that you mentioned it's palpable around the program right now. And that is amazing. I mean, it's been a long time since I think the optimism and the excitement has been at a level like this.
I mean, I put a post on X. Our spring game was cooler than yours. Our spring game was cooler than yours. And it really felt that way. It felt like, look, I don't know how you would itemize these things around the country, but I can't imagine there's many fan bases walking out of the activities and all the trappings surrounding their spring game that are much happier than Mountaineer Nation was coming out of everything they got to soak in on Saturday at Milan Puskar Stadium. And it's amazing to me in watching Coach Nealon with the little kids before the game starts that it's been 40 years. I mean, I remember when all this started. And even playing in these games, that was a big deal because it was still a novelty that it was tied to the Children's Hospital.
Sure.
So hats off to Coach Nealon. Credits his,
awesome.
His late wife for the idea, but it has been a big deal for a long time and impacted and helped a lot of folks for a great cause. But yeah, I just can't imagine Mountaineer fans. I know that a lot of buzz came out of Nebraska. They always get a big turnout. And Matt Rule's doing nice things out there. But if you're going to look again, if you want to itemize 2, 3, 4, 5 spring games, it's hard for me to envision a fan base appetite being more sated than what ours was on Saturday. It was just, you got a little bit of everything you wanted. You got to see kind of sort of football. It wasn't tackle, but you got to see uniforms and guys in position to make plays. But more so than that, you saw Pat White, you saw Pat McAfee, you saw a great, musical performance to kick
Yeah.
things off. You
Yep.
you
Huey
saw
Mack.
an unveiling of new uniforms. It was a lot to soak in. Perfect weather for it. So yeah, I thought it was a win.
Absolutely. Certainly was a win. I had a great time. I mean, we were saying, it's Sunday night as Jed and I record this episode that, is of course dropping here Monday morning. Like we put the girls down to bed before I came down here into the basement to record with Jed. And my wife Morgan was like, this was such a great weekend. Like we had a great day in Morgantown yesterday. Today we took the girls, we went to church, we went to lunch, we played outside. The weather was great. I think it was such a great weekend. And I think a lot of, like I was driving home Saturday evening, so we went to the game. We left a little early. The girls were starting to get a little cantankerous. It's tough. I mean, they're two and a half and one. They did really good until like middle of the third quarter, and then we were like, all right, let's keep it moving. We went to Fishbowl. I've got my sister is in school at WVU. She's a sophomore, and then my wife's brother, my brother-in-law, is a freshman at WVU. So we picked them up, went to Fishbowl, had like a late lunch, early dinner. And then I'm driving home and my two girls and my wife are all asleep in the car, and it was just one of those, I know you've had those moments, Jed, when you're driving home from a family function and everyone else is passed out. I've had a couple of them now. This is only like the second or third time it's happened early in my family days, but I'm driving home, everyone's asleep, and I've just got the biggest smile on my face. I'm like, what a perfect day. What a great day, And so hats off to everybody who made that possible.
It's awesome. Yeah, you get used to it because it's every beach trip you ever take. You're left alone as a dad with the radio, and it is a cool feeling.
Jed, that's how this
podcast.
That's how this podcast started 2 years ago. You called me when I was driving home from Hilton Head, and our first daughter was like 9 or 10 months old, and my wife's, and you and I talked for I put in my ear pods while I was driving. Probably shouldn't have done that, but you and I talked for like an hour as I was driving home, and everyone's passed out in the car. Yeah.
And we made the most of it. We capped our weekend off. We took the dogs up on the trail and walked them to the Blackwater Dam outside of Davis. Perfect weather for it. Mav's down there playing in the river with his mom, looking for crawdads, and it was a great weekend. And you couldn't, like I said, I am not surprised that I saw Ren Baker in as good a mood as he was when that thing was getting wrapped up on Saturday. It was terrific.
Yep. And I told him, listen, I'm one of these people, I don't like to bother people, if that makes sense. Like people like Ren Baker, right? That are, people asking them for photos, all this stuff. And that's great. Like those guys, that's part of their job. They know that. I'm not knocking that. I just spend time around people like that. And so I don't like to bug them because I know how often they're asked of those things. But it was at that Almost Heaven tailgate area where Huey Mack was doing the concert, as you mentioned. And they had all kinds of cool inflatables and bounce houses and stuff like that for the kids. So our oldest was there running around before the game, having a great time. And we go to leave to walk into the stadium. It's probably like 11:30 at this point, 11:15. And Ren is just standing off to the side of the stage by himself, eating a pepperoni roll, like you would expect a WVU athletic director to be. And he's just standing there by himself as we were walking past. And I was like, you know what? Like just real. And so I stopped real quick. I was like, hey, can we take a picture real quick? This is my daughter. I said, my wife and I met here, I'm class of 2013. Just thank you so much for I didn't want to bother him for too long. I mean, it was all less than 60 seconds, probably. Picture, just he talked to Olivia for a second. And then I said, just thank you so much for everything you're doing. Because it's between all of our football, baseball, what basketball was at, where the women's program's at and where the men's team is at now after navigating a tough year, like, it's an exciting time. Our men's soccer team was just in the Final Four, a few months ago, Jed. Let's not forget that either. Like volleyball had their best season that they've had in decades. It's an exciting time to be a Mountaineer fan.
He's hit some home runs with the hires that he's made, and let's hope he hit another one with men's basketball. But yeah, we're in good shape with Ren Baker. I mean, I remember a lot of things from the week that we spent down in Charlotte for the bowl game, and among them is the 20 minutes or so. It was a while that Ren, Chrissy, and I ended up just chatting it up at about midnight. We were waiting on our Ford that we had ordered because the kids were up in the room waiting for us. We talked to Garrett's mom and Garrett. They were down. We were kind of in the atrium, and we bumped into Ren, and next thing you know, Ren and I are sitting there with Chrissy, and we're solving the world's problems, and he's just such a. I tell you what, it's fun to listen to him in any setting. When you hear him do media, he does a great job with it.
Yeah.
But when you really get to pick his brain in a setting like that and ask your own questions about the things you're most curious about, big picture wise, he's just so astute with all the issues and challenges that confront modern college sports. And he's on top of it. And you walk away from it every time thinking, man, he's got a plan. He really does. He very little was lost from this guy. He's got a strategy. He's got a plan. He sees things big picture and micro, and we're going to be in good places.
Jed, sometimes in business, you hire an employee and you're blown away and you go, wow, I don't know how long I'm going to be able to hold on to this guy. Might be 3 years, might be 5 years. I hope it's a while. I don't know how long I'm going to be able to hold on to this guy, but he's a star and he's going to go places. That's how I feel about Ren Baker. Like, I think he's a star. I think he's going to go places, and I'm praying to God he's in Morgantown as long as possible, because I think he is just dynamite at what he is doing. So big shout out to him again and everybody involved with a great Saturday. Jed, of course, as Ren continues to put his touches and his own kind of, fingerprints all over all the programs, the athletic department, certainly football, a big part of that has been uniforms, a big part of the buzz with the spring game on Saturday as well, too. New uniforms. It was teased earlier in the week, so everybody knew it was going to happen, was going to wait for it. And then they were end of the first quarter, right? Unveiled, I believe, is when it was, or maybe sometime in the middle of the second quarter, but I know it was in the first half. And our guy Skylar can throw up pictures of those uniforms right now. Jed, new uniforms. No, not drastic changes here, but certainly noticeable ones. I mean, if you're watching on YouTube, you could, maybe compare the pictures that Skylar's putting up to the Zach Frazier jersey I'm wearing here. There's stripes on the shoulder now, the Dub V logo, the flying Dub V returns to the sleeves as well, too. The West Virginia and the Mountaineers across the chest, like we've seen in the Country Roads uniforms. And then, of course, the big one, I think, for the uniform geeks, the return of the pant stripes as well, too,
Yeah,
Jed.
that's a big one.
We got a poll that I'll get to here in a minute, but just your kind of initial thoughts on these jerseys and when you saw them on Saturday.
I liked it. Some people don't like the stripe on the shoulder. I think it kind of grew on me. Seeing it as we're seeing different combinations of these uniforms throughout the course of the day on Saturday, I think by the last time I saw the grouping, I liked them more than the first time I saw it, if that makes any sense. But yeah, the stripes on the pants, that's a little technicality, but for some people, that's a very big deal that their eyes go right to it.
Yep.
And I do think there's some winning combinations in this. I'm not a monochrome uniform guy, so I'm more interested to see. Like, I'm standing there when they first brought them out. I was standing there with Garrett on the field, and I asked him. I said, "Which one you like best?" And he said, "Oh, all blue, all blue." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm not a monochrome guy. I like mixing my colors up, but I see it as an improvement, and I don't know. It gives you some flexibility. One of the things that's worth mentioning too is we've done away with the grays.
Yes.
So some people loved them, some people hated them, but that's not part of it.
And watch this space too, because the grays are gone, but there certainly could be something else coming in their place.
There certainly could.
That's all we'll say.
There certainly could. Yeah. Stay tuned at a later date.
That's exactly right.
But yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts?
So a couple little things. In general, I've been kind of hoping for a uniform overhaul. Not that I hated ours, but I thought they were just, honestly, a little vanilla, a little bland. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I thought we could do some things to spice them up a little bit without trying to be Oregon, right? So I love the logo being back on the sleeves. Like, that's a big thing for me. I don't know what it is, but I like logos on the sleeves. Big fan of that. I like the Mountaineers and the West Virginia across the chest. I will say, though, I wish it was a little bit smaller. Like, remember the Pat White and Steve Slayton early days and the Rasheed Marshall end days, the few years that there was the subtle Mountaineers written across the chest.
I sure do.
I wish it was a little more subtle instead of as big as it is, but I still like it being back. I love the pant stripes. That's a thing that I've wanted for a while. I will say this, though, Jed, just one thing. I don't like our font. Like, I know that sounds funny. But I think the same for our basketball uniforms, for our baseball uniform. I mean, I'm wearing it right here. Like, I don't hate it, but I was kind of hoping the font was going to be a little bit different. I don't love it. It's always kind of bothered me with and you could see it with the 2 and the 4 because it's obviously 2024. They're wearing 2024 number jerseys when they unveil them. And you can kind of see it with this 4 that I've got. It's just a little quirky. Like, I wish we just had more kind of like block style regular numbers. That is the only, if I could change one thing, that would be it. It wouldn't be the size of the font. If I could just change one thing, I wish we would use a different font for our numbers for our basketball and our football jerseys. It's a hipster. That's what it is, Jed. Our font for our numbers is just too hipster for me. Just give me a classic block letter. That's all I need. I don't need some hipster font. But I'm happy overall, certainly.
Is this still considered? I don't remember because I don't pay as much attention to these. The pickaxe inspired, or was it? Okay, I thought that's
so. I think we moved away from it. I think we
pickaxe.
slightly moved away from it when we did the little tweaks, but I think it is still like it's not to the same magnitude it was during the Dana era. I don't think.
Yeah.
But it still plays into it. Yeah.
Here's a hope that I have. We cycled through that entire period of our previous uniforms with this as a combination possibility and never utilized it. I hope we see it here. Once again, I have one wish. I want to see this combination. Of course, it'd be a road game. Gold helmet, white jersey, blue pants.
Yep.
We could have done it with the other uniforms. We never did. Instead, hey, we're going to wear white again for the 26th time. Come on. Hey, how about white with just a tiny tweak? Just one time.
Oh,
gold helmet, white jersey, blue pants instead of Stormtrooper again for the 20. Now, Tony and I talked about it during the broadcast. Our record in the Stormtrooper uniforms like 2 and 26, whatever it might be.
That's why we
but that's a
don't like
large
it.
function.
Yeah.
You typically play it on the road in night games. You wear it. So you're playing good teams on the road.
Correct.
Your record's not going to be optimal, right? So it makes sense.
Correct.
But once more, gold helmet, white jersey,
come on,
blue pants, please, just once.
Come on, Ren. Come on, baby. I will say too, I love that the white jerseys, that the numbers are outlined in gold now. I think that was a much needed touch as well. You can't have just like last year when we were playing at Penn State wearing a jersey that was just white and blue. It bothered me. You got to have some gold in there. And finally now the trim around the numbers, chef's kiss. It's the perfect amount of gold for those white jerseys. Jed,
if we go blue top, blue helmet, blue jersey, white pants now, it will look much better because of the stripe.
Correct.
But go ahead.
100%. We did run a poll on our In the Gun Twitter page. You can follow us there at In the Gun Podcast on Twitter, on X, on whatever you want to call it. Your thoughts on the new WVU spring game uniforms. And I think it's about where we are. Better. So there were 4 options. Awesome, better but not perfect, meh, or get off my lawn. And the lion's share was better but not perfect, but by far too, the second most popular was awesome. So combined, 83% of our people said either awesome or better but not perfect. And I think that's about where we are. You're always going to have people that are going to dislike something about jerseys, right? They're polarizing in this day and age. But I think that was a fitting Twitter poll brought to you in this episode of ITG by our friends at Johnston Equipment. Make sure you're checking out their new location, Route 33, right outside of Weston. Now, Jed, we got about 10 minutes left here. We got to actually talk about the game as well, too. Give me some of your analysis. Give me some of your thoughts. I love to see the playmaking from Josiah Trotter. I thought that was fantastic. I love to see him. And I did think it was funny. You could tell me how you feel about this, too, before I'll really turn it over to you for the game analysis. But I thought that there was a clear onus, at least early on, of like, make Garrett throw some touch passes, right? Like, we've all talked about this, that one of the things Garrett has to, get better at, and Drew Fabianich talked about this with us on the podcast as well, too, is knowing when to take some heat off those passes. They don't all have to be fastballs, right? I thought it was maybe coincidental, but funny that a lot of the plays at first for Garrett Green seemed to be more check downs, dumps into the flats, things like that, to really make him kind of work on some of those touch passes instead of letting him zing one in there. But give me some of your, I know you got notes. Give me some of your thoughts, the things that you came away with on Saturday.
Well, let's hit the quarterbacks first, and then we'll move to the other stuff. But we're going to spend, here's a teaser for you. I want to do an entire episode focused on Garrett I'm going to break down his numbers, break down the areas that we need to improve, break down what he was great at. I have a lot of analytics and metrics that make it really interesting. But we're going to get to a lot of that. And we're also going to talk about pass protection, how we avoided sacks. But we have an entire episode of that we're going to get to, because the thing about Garrett and touch is, here's the promising part. We've seen him do it. Like when I think of that early touchdown he tossed to Jaheim against Cincinnati, that's a touch, drop it in the bucket throw. The problem is he wasn't nearly, and that's what I told Drew, in my estimation, not nearly consistent enough with that touch. So we've seen him do it, but there's also many times we saw him not do it. So one of the things, and Neil talked about this in his remarks after the game, if anybody was impaired or limited by the quick whistle and the nature of keeping everybody off the ground, because again, this wasn't pads, but it was by no means full contact, and certainly for the quarterbacks who are both in white jerseys, Garrett was in position, I think, to make some bigger plays with his legs than what he was given a chance to do. But I understand why they were doing what they were doing to keep things safe. So he was probably hurt by that as much as anybody was, because that's kind of his game. I have some notes on a couple different throws that I thought spoke loudly to me. When you looked at the throw that he made on the Verts package up the middle, it was a nice throw where Jarrell was heading toward the safety, and Jarrett kind of helped protect him by throwing the away shoulder from the safety and threw it low. So when Jarrell caught that football, he was able to catch it on a slide and protect himself from Izzy Boyce, who was making his way over there. So I thought that was just a natural.
That was a good
that
throw.
was a
You're right.
passer, not a
I remember
throw.
which one you're talking about. Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
I liked that. That helped cushion him from the safety. I liked the fact that he made a nice RPO read and throw to Tyler Evans on that slant. He had one of the things that struck out to me, back-to-back slants on that one possession. He made nice throws that he executed well. That's one of the things in the future episode that I'm going to talk. I'm going to talk about the routes that he struggled most with, and he struggled with slant routes last year. I mean, it wasn't, people talk about his short game. No, really, it was his intermediate game that he suffered the most in. But we'll get very granular on that when we do the Garrett episode. But it was nice to see him hit a couple of those slants and hit them on the run, especially off the RPO. Now, I did see they had a smash route, and we talked, one of the big offseason projects with Garrett's going to be his footwork. Sometimes his feet get tangled, and I saw him get tangled when he went to throw one smash to Traylon. He kind of hit it in the dirt and skidded it to him. I know he wished he had that one back. That was all footwork. But the good thing about it was he adjusted on the next series on the same route to Traylon, also to the wide side of the field, also a smash route. He corrected his footwork, and this time he hit it and delivered it perfectly. So he was learning on the fly. Now, when you look at the interception on the slant, I'm thinking back to the one he was targeting T-Ray. In other words, what was happening, they motioned Jaheim to empty. So if you can envision this, Jaheim motioned to the wide side of the field. So that was giving you a trips look to the wide side. To the boundary side, you had doubles. So you had Preston Fox in the slot, and you had T-Ray to the wide side. Well, what ended up happening was the defensive line twisted. And when the defensive line twisted, that's the interception to Trotter. Well, as Garrett's a short quarterback, and I think this is something I can speak to because I was a short quarterback. Sometimes from the pocket, your vision's impaired if the twist gets caught up between A and B gap. That kind of hits your line of sight, especially if you're trying to read something hot. So a couple things happened there. In part, he recognized the twist, and he thought, hey, I'm in good shape. The ball's coming out early. And I think our numbers are solid in pass pro. I will give Trotter as much credit in making the interception. We talked all spring about how Josiah Trotter does an incredible job of diagnosing what the offense is doing because he plays at a very advanced age. When you listen to Jeff Coons, he made a great point. He's like, look, this guy's played a ton of football in high school. He logged a ton of defensive snaps.
Yeah.
So don't tell me he doesn't have experience just because he hasn't played a lot of college football. He plays from a very advanced snap count perspective, and he plays like it defensively when you see how he thinks and IDs things. this was case in point. I think he very quickly recognized Garrett's head moving to that side of the field. Here comes T-Ray on that slant. So there's Trotter in position to really, that thing was coming in hot. And he reacted in an incredible way to pick that football off. But yeah, I think that's what happened. You had French was coming in on that twist. Ty French was coming in, and he did a nice job of collisioning the guard. So it really messed up the A and B gap to hurt the vision of Garrett. And that's, I think, what led to that turnover. So that's what intrigued me there. But again, I think Garrett's game, it was difficult to read it. I more look at this broadly throughout the course of the spring. I see Garrett continuing to take steps and make progress, not so much because of what I saw on Saturday in a two-hand touch game, but because of what I've seen throughout the course of the spring. And then looking at Nico, or one of my favorite Pat McAfee remarks was the Italian. He sounded like the Joker in Batman when he was talking about Nico, the Italian over there. So Nico, again, a couple throws that stood out to me. You might remember the one that he buzzed it off the ear of Trey Lathan, who was flying to the flat. He hit Jaden Bray on a slant. If you time that right, that is going to look like dangerous business. And that throw did. Nico timed that perfectly. The slant throw coming out of the boundary side, right off the backer's ear. I think he made a great throw on that touchdown to Huddy. Yes, it was an incredible catch by Huddy on that fade, but it was also an incredible placement of that football on his part. And then when you look at the two interceptions that Nico threw, what struck me is both of them were not from a stationary position, but he was on the move. One rolling left, one rolling right. And it's always going to be a taller ask for left-handed Nico to ask him to roll right. But when he threw that pick, it was right after the fade touchdown to Huddy. When he threw the pick that was intercepted by Zay Jennings, I mean, that's just a ball that, especially, that's dangerous business if you throw it behind somebody on a jet route to the flat. You got to understand that. Nico knows that. He'll learn from that. It's a great teaching opportunity. And the other one, it was a situation that when Aiden Garnes picked that off, he was rolling to his right. They were trying to let a smash route to that side develop. There was poor protection off the edge. I think he's got to learn in that situation. You can't win on every down. Just toss that thing up into the 10th row, and it won't get picked off. A great play by Aiden Garnes, which we'll get to in a second. He decisively took the quick, easy access throw on the smash, and it might be something small, but I think it's a step that a quarterback is heading in the right direction. The old saying that you can't go broke making a profit. Look, I like to see easy access yards for my young quarterback. And if you understand what a smash route's doing, the wide out, it's two receivers to that side, a wide out and a slot. And it's designed to attack any form of cover two or any two safety look, even quarters, depending on how the safety might play it, the flat player might play it, I should say. So in this particular situation, the wide out's going to run a very short, abbreviated 5-yard route, whether it's a hitch, whether it's a drag, whatever it might be, depending on the coverage. But it's going to be the under on the over-under portion of the route. Meanwhile, the flag or post corner is going to be run by the slot. It's incumbent upon the quarterback to read that. Well, sometimes if you have a soft corner, don't get greedy. Take the quick, easy access throw. I mean, when I would pre-snap cover 3 and we had a smash on, sometimes Rich would be telling me to check out of it to a more favorable play. I'm like, no, I'm not checking out. I'm taking that's a smash route. I mean, I'm just going to beat the flat player with my throw to the flat. I'll throw it outside shoulder.
You're going to make a profit, right?
Absolutely. The flat player can't get there if I throw it quickly enough, and I'm not indecisive. I liked seeing Nico make quick decisions, and he was decisive on those types of throws. And then when you watched him, and this kind of just, I think it takes reps. You saw a curl flat route, a combination in which he threw the outside shoulder to Jaden Bray. Jaden was open, but this ball was incomplete. That's part Jaden Bray, part Nico. Jaden Bray, I thought, bounced that curl too far inside. He should have recognized. I think what Nico saw was the backer flying to the curl area, and he was trying to hit him in what we call the first window, wider than the backer could cover. That's just, you got to sync that up. Jaden Bray and Nico haven't played together much.
Sure.
So that's the kind of thing as a quarterback. If you play with them long enough, you'll start to recognize their body language, which window they're going to attack on routes like that. So it's just little things that we got to polish up, and we have a whole summer in camp to do it. That's the good news. But from a quarterback perspective, that's what I saw. What say you? We'll quickly move on to a couple other points, defense, and close this thing out.
No, I think you nailed it. I think there was certainly some teachable stuff for both guys, but for Nico there as well. But that's what you like to see. That's what you like to have Jed, I mean, I was telling you about my buddies earlier when we saw you. We were sawing you down there filming the guys before everything started, and we were laughing. Like, another thing that we were talking about is just as we were watching Nico, like, how much of a luxury it is to have this guy around still in this era when you expect guys with his capabilities to not hang around behind somebody anymore. They leave and go play, and you can't knock them for it. That's just kind of the reality. They don't have to sit a year in a lot of cases. In most cases, they don't have to sit a year. In fact, you've really messed up now if you have to sit a year, right? I mean, it's pretty easy to move out of one situation into another. So to be able to see the improvement from Garrett and the things to work on too, but to be able to balance that with Nico as well too, and to still see that from your backup in this day and age was exciting to me.
If you want to close the offense out with, again, I saw steps from the receivers. Preston Fox catches the football. That's what you'd expect.
Man.
Hudson Clement capped off a great spring with a nice spring game. Traylon Ray was busy all day for a reason. He's going to be highly targeted. I expect a lot of production from him. We'll see more out of Gallagher than we did. I like the fact that he did go both ways. We got to peek with him. Once again, we've seen it some in practice, but not only nickel corner, he was playing field corner. So I think there's some possibilities of what he might be able to do. Jaden Bray is the one that intrigues me most because they call him Optimus Prime for a reason. He is a man. He's man strong. He really is. He's a big physical dude. And once things slow down within the confines of this offense and this scheme, I see big things for him in the fall. Quick number for him. I was tracking this, just looking at some metrics, and he was 4th in the Big 12 in his win percentage on 50-50 balls at Oklahoma State last year. I think he had 11 his way. He caught 7 of them. You can trust him with the football in flight because he is a strong kid who will get his clamps on it. On the offensive line, I'm still curious as we move into the summer, who are going to be the swingmen? I got my candidates. I know they want Johnny Williams to play. I know we think with Bosley, we have some potential at right tackle. Solly Weedman showed some good things at guard. They're really high on Nick Cray, but he needs to take a step. They're the candidates, even include Mo Hamilton. Okay, and you have some options at center. But who are going to be the guys that turn into the swingmen who are 6 and 7? Who's going to be this year's Jaquay Hubbard, this year's Nick Malone? That needs to happen and materialize over the course of the next few months. But defensively, what intrigues you most, Wes? Because we'll close with that.
Cool. Josiah Trotter, certainly a big part of that. Like I said, I like that you brought up Rodney Gallagher playing both ways as well too. It's tough. I liked what I saw from the defensive line, but as you mentioned, I mean, it's 75-80% football. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, there's contact, there's physicality, but it's not full live action. So I feel like sometimes that just does in general make it difficult to really judge guys that are playing in the box, whether you're defensive line or a linebacker. But it feels like the group that they have at linebacker with what they're returning in Trey Lathan. By the way, shout out to him for that. Did you see all the hype around that Neil Breezy t-shirt that he was wearing, that Neil Brown t-shirt? He's selling those now on his social media, by the way, for everybody who wants one. The skill set that him and Ben Cutter have, you combine that with a guy like Josiah Trotter, obviously some other candidates in there as well too, but I just feel like they could really be cooking with gas at that position. So those are probably some of the names and the things that stood out most for me on the defensive side of the football.
The last thing, the cherry on top for me offensively, and then I'm going to pivot to agree with you. Jaheim White, he made one play, and I doubt anybody even noticed it, but I was studying it like a weirdo. He threw a shoulder into TJ Jackson to help Xavier Bosley in pass pro on his way to the flat. That's where he necessarily has to take the next step. And you know what? That disrupted TJ Jackson just enough to help Garrett out.
Sure.
That's the next step for Jaheim White, to recognize things like, hey, my tackle's in trouble on my way out. A little nudge here. You know what? That bought him an extra half beat.
No doubt.
So hats off there. I know that's something that Chad Scott was working on with Jaheim, but those linebackers, Wes, that's necessarily going to have to be the strength of this football team defensively. I mean, we go 6 deep, because think of it like this. We're now all in on being an on front 3-4 defense. So when we say linebackers, let's define the terms here. We're talking Mike and Will in the box.
Correct.
Because
yes.
outside of that, we're going to use different
not
language.
edge guys. Yeah, not pass rushers. Yep.
Okay. You also have the edge guy who's the old hybrid bandit who now they're calling a spur. Think of him to the boundary. Now he could drop into coverage or he could be a fourth rusher, but we're not including him with the linebackers when we talk about linebackers. Then the other side of the field is your spur or your spear, I should say, which is more of your hybrid defensive back linebacker. So your true backers are your Mike and Will in the box. Now, the beauty of it is all six are cross-trained. All six can play either way. But there are six guys going to be in that room healthy, we expect in the summer, who've got meaningful Power 5 reps because Favoris was out. He was banged up. But you talked about a couple of them. Trotter, I think, has a chance to be special. I really do.
Same.
Ben Cutter, we saw flashes of what he could do when he was pressed into duty last year. I do expect Ben Cutter to take the next step. Caden Beiser has had a great offseason. He's gotten faster. When you look at how he moves sideline to sideline, he's a lot quicker. So I think he's in position to make a next step. Reed Carrico is a great addition to that room. An Ironton, Ohio kid who fits into us, what we're trying to do culturally, everything about it. It's just there's so many names in that room. We have six that you're going to draw from, six that are going to play. Now, one of the things I talked to Eddie V about, Vesterinen, the defensive line last year went 8-9 deep, and that was a luxury we didn't anticipate. So we might not be able to do that quite as much. I'd like to find more depth up there, but I don't know if we will to that extent. Now, on those longer drives, that's where that D line helped us win out last year. You can shuffle in when you're 8-9 deep on long drives. So the best way to do that now is, hey, how about winning on third down? Okay. And you don't have as many long drives. Get them off the field.
Right.
So we led the Big 12 in sacks last year. What I like about that is we did it without necessarily recruiting to this scheme. Now we have the TJ Jacksons, the Ty Frenches. And I'll tell you what, I saw as much in practice, Wes, that I needed to see more so than in the spring game, because there were times in practice when I saw, and TJ Jackson gives you versatility too. He's going to play across that defensive line. But there were times I saw him playing boundary tackle, attacking that B gap. Meanwhile, the tackle is occupied trying to help the guard because he's just such a hand load and so explosive. Here comes Ty French, meanwhile, from the boundary off the edge, and the tackle has to account for that too. So
right.
I think from a personnel standpoint, we're about to have some fun that in the past maybe we weren't built to have. And I do like the fact that we've gotten longer on that back end. We're more versatile in terms of what you can and can't do with the pieces in place. Being able to drop Aubrey Burks down and potentially play Spear as an edge rusher, as a guy who can set the edge against the run, is a luxury we didn't have before. We have some veterans back on the back end to help us, but we also have some youth. Zay Jennings will play a lot of football for us. Zay Jennings was a factor consistently all spring. You saw the pick in the end zone. Now, freshman mistake with the red zone penalty they have. You got to learn from that and move forward and forge on.
Sure.
But it was you were hard pressed to watch a live practice in which he didn't make some kind of difference that jumped out. He is going to play, and I'm convinced he'll play early. So that's one more guy that's going to be in the mix on the back end. When you look at the additions at corner, from Garnett to TJ Crandall to what we already had coming back in Montre Miller, we even added another guy over the course of the weekend, a Charlotte transfer, and Dantes Fagan.
Yep.
Talk about the buzz of the spring game. We had a 25 commit, we had a 26 commit, and we had another portal commit. And this is a guy, interesting background real briefly. He grew up participating in rodeo events in Oklahoma. He's from Oklahoma. So then he plays small college ball, transfers the JC route into Kansas, transfers from there to play D1 ball, FBS ball at Charlotte, and his final year of eligibility will be spent in Morgantown helping out that secondary as well as a corner. So, yeah, I think that the additions that we've made on that back end and as edge guys give us some toys. Vic Cabral is going to do a good job with that room with those bandits. How can I talk this much without talking about Tyron Bradley and that 250-pound body type?
Yeah, he's a big boy.
That's a completely different animal that you have to set to that boundary. And he played a whale of a game against North Carolina in that bowl game. So I'm excited, and I agree with Neil. He said a couple pressers ago, I think our defense is ready to take a step. On the interior, I see Fatorma playing good football. I see Hammond Russell ready to take a step. I think Eddie V, who I interviewed after the game on Saturday, is I have to agree with the staff. He's on the cusp of having an all Big 12 caliber season. As a high motor guy who just blue collars they come with no off switch. So
Yeah.
how can you not be excited by this defense and this group of backers? It all starts there, but I think we can build around them.
I certainly think we can too. Like you said, I mean, that needs to be the strength of defense this season, and it feels like it should be the strength of the defense this season. And I love that personally, and I was excited to see a little bit of those guys on Saturday, but obviously can't wait to see where they're at when we get to the summer and, of course, the fall here when things really get going. Jed, fantastic stuff. Any final thoughts before we close this down? This has been a jam-packed episode here. I love it. A lot of good things that we've touched on.
Hats off to Zach. Excited for him. I'm very eager to get a Zach Frazier Steeler jersey. We can maybe all wear them together on the show one night.
It's funny you said that. I've had at least 4 people like out of town, family members, WVU fans. You'd be the 5th who'd been like, "Hey, I don't care how much. I don't care what. Just whenever you see them, buy me one. All right. Just don't. I don't need a text. I don't need a call. Just buy me one and tell me how much I owe you. So I'll add you to the list. I'll add you to the list.
So I'll close with that. And the overriding picture of the spring, there was a lot of focus on special teams. We know how lax our kickoff coverage, for instance, was last year. It hurt us multiple times. But we found ways to small ball that and because it's difficult to go high velocity, full contact on the special teams units. So we found ways to turn into drill work. And I think we found some very effective and productive ways to do that on a regular basis that will show some improvement. When we actually, I think Wes, I think we have maybe 4 or 5 live kickoffs in a practice setting all year.
Yeah.
And we reserve those for August. So it's difficult to find out how much improvement you have made. But yeah, the special teams units have been an ongoing project throughout the spring. We didn't talk about them through the show. We didn't talk about them through the spring. But trust me when I say the drill work has continued on an incredibly regular basis. And I think you'll see improvement there.
That's good to know. That's what I like to hear. And yeah, for all of our own sanities, let's see improvement there, certainly. A big thanks to our producer, Skylar Callahan, for putting this together for us, as always, producer / co-host / Mr. Do-It-All, and to all of our sponsors for presenting this episode 158 of ITG. The last thing that Jed and I ask, as always, before we get out of here, is to be an ear and tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast. For the Runaway Beer Truck and the Signal Caller, Jed Drenning, I'm Wesley Euler. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. As always, you've been in the gun.
ITG.
The fun doesn't have to stop here.
Be sure to hit subscribe and never miss an episode.
If you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback,
be sure to follow us on X at In the Gun Podcast.
Join us again next time.
Until then,
tell an ear to tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast.
This mission is over. It's over.